Isabella's hands, gripping the steering wheel, trembled slightly, not because of the treacherous driving conditions in the rainy night, but because her heart was brimming with excitement at finally wrapping up her business trip ahead of schedule. In the trunk of the car, quietly resting, was the limited edition wristwatch she'd asked someone to bring back from Switzerland, a birthday gift Noah had been talking about for half a year. She could almost picture the sparkle in his eyes when he unwrapped the box. As soon as the car came to a stop at the villa's gate, Isabella couldn't wait any longer. She grabbed the gift bag and dashed into the rain. The motion sensor light in the entryway flicked on, but instead of Noah's familiar voice greeting her as usual, there was only silence. A strange perfume hung in the air, sweet and cloying enough to make her chest tighten. She tiptoed toward the bedroom, her footsteps muffled by the carpet. Down the hallway lay a pair of high-heeled shoes that weren't hers. Fresh mud still clung to the heels. With a soft click, the bedroom door slid open ever so gently. The crystal lamp atop the dressing table cast a cold, sharp light, yet the beam's focal point was none other than a diamond necklace lying neatly in a velvet box. The pendant featured Noah's company's signature eagle motif, small and exquisite, yet it felt like a poisoned dagger, piercing straight into Isabella's eyes. 3 days ago, at the charity gala, Lucy wore a champagne-colored gown, and hanging around her neck was that dazzling piece of jewelry. Right then, she'd even laughed and asked Noah, "Your secretary's necklace is really stylish. It looks just like your company's logo." What did Noah say at the time? Oh, he said it was a cheap imitation Lucy had bought herself, and he teased her for being overly sensitive. It felt as if an invisible hand had clamped down hard on my chest, and a suffocating sensation washed over me in an instant. Isabella's legs gave way, and she sank heavily onto the cold floor. The gift bag slipped from her hands, and the watch's box crashed onto the carpet with a dull thud. Just then, 2 overlapping giggles echoed from the entryway, growing closer and clearer by the second. "Honey, when do you think that silly girl, Izzy, will finally figure it out?" Lucy's voice was sweetly coquettish and triumphant, laced with undisguised provocation. "I deliberately left that necklace on the dresser, just to see how clueless she'd look. What's the rush?" Noah's light laugh rolled out from his throat, laced with a coldness Isabella had never heard before. "Once I've secured Cavendish's mining rights, all of the E family's assets will belong to us. By then, don't even mention a single necklace. Hell, I'll buy you the entire jewelry store, if that's what you want. As for her, she's nothing but a worthless nobody with nothing but her family name. Without the E family's aura, she wouldn't even be worthy of tying my shoes." The 2 words, worthless nobody, struck Isabella's heart like a heavy hammer, reducing all the tender moments they'd shared to dust. How she'd stayed up all night by his bedside when he was sick, how she'd mortgaged the jewelry her mother had left behind to help him raise capital during his startup days, and how his eyes had shone with sincerity when he'd said, "I'll love only Isabella for the rest of my life." It had all been a carefully crafted lie. She clapped her hand over her mouth just in time to stifle a sob, but tears streamed down her face like beads broken loose from a string, splashing onto the icy floor and spreading into a tiny puddle. The bedroom door swung open wide, and Noah stepped in, wrapping his arm around Lucy's waist. Both of them still wore lingering traces of that ambiguous intimacy on their faces. When they saw Isabella sitting on the floor, Noah's smile froze instantly on his face. Lucy instinctively flinched behind him, but soon she peeked out again, her eyes gleaming with a mischievous delight, clearly relishing the spectacle. Slowly, Isabella rose to her feet, her whole body trembling, not from fear, but from sheer, blistering rage. She stared fiercely at Noah, her voice hoarse as if sandpaper were rasping against her throat. "Noah, who did you call a fool?" Noah steadied himself for a moment, trying to reach out and take her hand, his face once again softening into his usual gentle expression. "I say, just let me explain. This isn't what you think. Get away from me." Isabella jerked her hand away from him with such force that Noah stumbled backward. Snatching up the necklace box from the dresser, she hurled it straight at Lucy. "You bitch." Taking a necklace I bought with my own money and still daring to swagger around my home like you own the place," Lucy screamed, darting behind Noah. Seeing this, Noah immediately stepped in to protect her and bellowed at Isabella. "Isabella, are you out of your mind? Don't push it any further." "Push it further?" Isabella seemed to have heard the funniest joke in the world and suddenly burst into laughter, yet tears streamed down her face even more fiercely. "Me push it further? Noah, I've given you everything, my heart, my soul, and yet you've teamed up with outsiders to scheme against my family's wealth. Put your hand on your conscience and tell me honestly, how have I treated you all these years?" She took another step closer, her eyes brimming with disappointment and fury that almost seemed to swallow him whole. "Do you really think I'm that stupid? Right from the moment Lucy put on that necklace, I knew something was off. If I hadn't come home early today, how much longer would you have kept me in the dark?" Seeing Noah utterly speechless, Lucy stepped boldly out from behind him, arms crossed defiantly as she taunted, "Isabella, after everything that's happened, what are you playing at now? Pretending to be the victim? If it weren't for your rich dad, Noah wouldn't have given you a second glance. He loves me, not you, this shallow socialite with nothing but a pretty face." Slap. A crisp sound of a hand striking flesh echoed through the bedroom. Isabella's raised hand was still trembling, while Lucy clutched her cheek, which had instantly turned red, staring at her in disbelief. "You dare hit me? So, what if I hit you?" Isabella's eyes were icy cold. "You've been seducing other men's husbands and scheming to steal their family's wealth. This shameless woman like you? Even hitting you would be too lenient." She turned to Noah, looking at the man she'd loved for 5 years, her heart sinking to the bottom of her chest. "And you, Noah." Noah instinctively took a step back, trying to defend himself. "Isabella, slap." Another loud slap rang out. This blow was even harder than the one she'd landed on Lucy. Immediately, a clear imprint of her fingers appeared on Noah's cheek. Isabella stared at him, each word carefully enunciated. "That slap was for betraying me. From today onward, we're getting a divorce. You and your mistress can just wait for the court summons. This won't be just a divorce battle. I'll also hand over evidence of your scheming to seize our family's assets. You'll pay the price, I promise." As soon as she finished speaking, Isabella turned on her heel and walked away. Only then did Noah realize he'd made a terrible mistake. He abruptly shoved Lucy, who was still crying and fussing nearby, and took a few quick steps forward, grabbing Isabella by the wrist. His voice trembled with a panic he'd never shown before. "Isabella, don't leave. I was wrong. I really was wrong. It was Lucy who seduced me. It's all her fault. Deep down, I've always loved you." Lucy stumbled backward, staring at Noah in utter disbelief.
"Noah,
"How could you say that? We had an agreement." "Shut up. You have no place to speak here." Noah snapped sharply, his eyes filled with disgust, as if the man who'd just moments ago been passionately tender with her wasn't even himself. He clutched Isabella's wrist tightly, his grip so strong it almost crushed her bones. "I please give me another chance. I don't want Cavendish's mining rights anymore. I don't want anything at all, as long as you just don't leave." Isabella struggled fiercely, her wrist throbbing with pain from his tight hold. As she stared at Noah's hypocritical face, she felt nothing but disgust. "Let go of me." "Noah, isn't it way too late for you to say all this now? I won't believe a single word you say." Seeing her determined stance, Noah's expression instantly turned sinister. He yanked Isabella into the bedroom, slammed the door shut behind them, and locked it tight, clutching the key firmly in his hand. "I'm not letting you go. You can't leave. If you walk out, I'll lose everything. Just stay right here. Wait until you've calmed down before we talk again." "Noah, you're crazy. This is illegal detention." Isabella was both shocked and furious, pounding hard on the door. "Open this door right now." Lucy watched the absurd scene unfolding before her, filled with anger and resentment, but too afraid to step in. She could only stand quietly to the side, softly sobbing. Noah leaned against the door, breathing heavily. As he looked at Isabella's desperate expression, A flicker of obsession flashed in his eyes. "I'm not crazy," he said, his voice trembling with desperation. "I just can't lose you, ISA. As long as you stay, we can go back to how things used to be. Please, just stay." Another clap of thunder echoed, and a bolt of lightning briefly illuminated Isabella's resolute face. She stopped banging on the door and stared coldly at Noah. "Go back to the past? Noah, you've already destroyed everything between us. Stop dreaming. Do you really think locking me up here will change anything? Let me tell you, it won't happen." She turned around, grabbed the gift bag from the floor, and violently hurled the wristwatch she'd yet to give away into the trash bin. Her gaze held not a trace of lingering affection. "Just you wait. Even if you lock me up here, I'll find a way out. And when I do, you'll pay double for what you've done today." For 3 days straight, Gray paced restlessly behind the bar at the Twilight Tavern, his restless energy palpable. Even after wiping the crystal glasses 3 times, he kept running his fingers over them again and again, leaving warm, faint traces on the cool glass surfaces. Isabella's image was etched into his mind. Every Wednesday at 7 o'clock sharp, she'd push open that wooden door adorned with a copper bell, smile at him, and say, "A whiskey on the rocks, make it the strongest you've got." Then she'd take her usual seat by the window, listening as he strummed his well-worn wooden guitar, playing songs like Hotel California or Yesterday. But this week, the copper bell hadn't rung for her anymore. A WeChat message from her had frozen at Monday's "see you this weekend," and when he dialed her phone, all he heard was a robotic female voice saying, "The number you've called is temporarily unavailable." It wasn't until Thursday afternoon that Tom, the builder who often dropped by the tavern, casually mentioned, "Noah said Isabella's got a cold and is staying home to rest." At those words, Gray's heart sank. He knew Isabella so well. She was the kind of woman who'd push through even a fever of 39 degrees just to get to the office and handle business. She'd never let a simple cold cut her off completely, much less ask Noah to check in on her behalf. The night descended like a thick black velvet shroud. As Gray locked the tavern's door, his knuckles turned pale from the sheer force of his grip. The street lamp at the corner cast a dim, yellowish halo, and he tilted his head back to gaze at the moon, half obscured by clouds. He took a deep breath, and his chest instantly felt suffused with a burning warmth. His bones crackled softly as they shifted and reformed in the shadows. A few seconds later, a black wolf nearly a meter tall appeared in the middle of the street. Its silver-gray eyes glowed brilliantly against the darkness, and the tip of its fluffy tail stood rigidly erect. Following the faint scent of gardenia that lingered in his memory, the perfume his mother had left behind, unchanged for years, he bolted forward on all fours, moving like a streak of black lightning, racing toward the rose-covered villa on the outskirts of town. The villa's floor-to-ceiling windows were drawn shut with heavy velvet curtains. Only the small light above the garage was on, casting a tiny patch of sickly pale illumination onto the ground. Gray crouched silently behind the bushes by the courtyard wall, his nose twitching slightly. The scent in the air tightened his heart. Isabella's gardenia fragrance was indeed present in this house, but the aroma was eerily stagnant, as if trapped in a sealed glass jar with no sign of movement whatsoever, even carrying a barely perceptible note of panic. Meanwhile, Noah's presence was mingled with the smell of expensive cologne, alcohol, and feigned calmness. He drove away promptly at 7 in the morning and returned at 10 in the evening, reeking of booze, his routine so normal it was downright eerie. Gray's wolf-like claws sank deep into the moist earth, his sharp nails scraping against the grass roots. He forced himself to suppress the low growl rising in his throat. Rushing in now would only alert Noah and send him running. He had to wait for an absolutely foolproof opportunity. The wait felt like it stretched endlessly until Friday night at 8 o'clock, when Gray finally seized his chance. Noah's black Bentley slowly pulled out of the villa's gate, its headlights slicing through the night as it headed toward the city center. Earlier that afternoon, Gray had deliberately called Noah's assistant, using the pretext of the pub's anniversary celebration and the desire to invite the Noahs, to confirm that Noah would be attending a business function tonight. But just as Gray leapt out from behind the bushes and rounded the corner toward the villa's back door, he spotted two bodyguards, dressed in black suits and wearing earpieces, standing guard at the top of the master bedroom staircase. Their hands were casually tucked into their waistbands, and they scanned the surroundings with sharp vigilance. Clearly, even though Noah was out, he hadn't let his guard down when it came to watching over Isabella. Gray's gaze hardened instantly. He swiftly retreated into the shadows, and a familiar burning sensation surged once more in his chest. As his bones cracked and popped, the silhouette of a black wolf stretched out against the night. He lowered his body, moving like a silent shadow that darted behind the bodyguards. Before they could even react, his sharp wolf claws struck precisely at the base of their necks. With two muffled groans, the bodyguards collapsed to the ground. Having cleared the last obstacle, Gray stepped up to the master bedroom door, his nose brushing lightly against the door panel as he inhaled deeply. Isabella's scent was right behind that door. He raised his paw and gently tapped the door, then called out in a deep voice, unique to his wolf heritage. "Isa? It's me, Gray." Suddenly, the knocking from inside stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of a key turning in the lock. With a soft click, the door swung open. Isabella stumbled out, her eyes widening in sheer terror when she finally saw the black wolf standing before her. Her pupils contracted sharply, and she took several hasty steps backward, clutching the hem of her nightgown tightly with both hands. "Why you? Who are you?" Her voice trembled with fear. Though the massive black wolf before her had no malicious intent in his gaze, she felt an instinctive dread nonetheless. Seeing her terrified reaction, Gray let out a gentle growl from deep within his throat. Slowly, he shifted back into human form, still carrying the faint warmth of his wolf fur. He picked up the coat from the ground and draped it over his shoulders, his voice slightly hoarse as he explained, "Isa, don't be afraid, it's me. I'm a werewolf, and this is my true form." Isabella stared at him with wide eyes, utterly incredulous. A werewolf? How could that possibly be? Gray stepped closer to her, his tone softening as he began to recount memories buried deep in his heart for years. "Do you remember when you were 10, in the woods outside town, you saved a little black wolf that had been wounded? You carried it home, carefully bandaged its wound, and even fed it milk and bread. That wolf was me. I come from a family of wolves. Back then, I'd run off playing too carelessly and got injured by hunters. Only you saved me. Ever since then, I've been quietly watching over you, seeing you grow up, watching you get married. I never imagined that we'd end up meeting again like this." Lala stood frozen in place, her mind slowly painting vivid images from childhood, the little black wolf shivering in the snow, its wet eyes eerily similar to Gray's gaze right now. She stared blankly at Gray, her eyes gradually filling with tears. "So, it was you. No wonder I felt such a strange sense of familiarity the first time I saw you in the tavern." As the fear slowly began to fade, it was replaced by a complex mix of emotions. Seeing her face finally relax, Gray let out a sigh of relief and quickly stepped forward to support her. "Now's not the time for this. We've got to hurry. Noah could come back any moment." Isabella nodded and fell into step behind Gray, her footsteps no longer as frantic as before. Gray immediately reached out to steady her, his hand meeting skin that was icy cold. Her body continued to shake uncontrollably, like a withered leaf trembling in the wind. Gray felt an overwhelming surge of tenderness, yet all he could do was gently pat her back and speak in the softest voice he could muster. "Don't be afraid. I'm here. I'll take you away now, and no one will ever trap you again." The pickup sped through the night, its engine emitting a deep, rumbling roar. Isabella looked at the man sitting in the passenger seat, half naked from the waist up, his muscles taut yet scarred with old wounds, and her voice still trembled as she asked, "Gray, is being a werewolf really that painful?" Gray tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. He didn't look at her. His gaze was fixed firmly on the darkness ahead, his voice low and raspy, as if it were being ground out from deep within his chest. "It's not the transformation itself that's painful, Isla. What's truly agonizing is carrying the sins of your ancestors, pretending to be an ordinary human in a world of humans." He paused briefly, then turned his head slightly to glance at her. In the night shadows, his golden pupils gleamed with a faint softness. Back then, when you saved me, not only did you save my life, but you also gave me a reason to try to make amends. Isabella curled up in the passenger seat, wrapped tightly in Gray's coat, watching the streets blur past outside the window. Tears still streamed down her face like beads broken loose from a string, falling onto the coat, resting on her knees and spreading tiny damp patches. Greer didn't ask any further questions. He silently took a pack of tissues from the glove compartment and handed them to her, then raised the car's air conditioning temperature by 2 degrees and turned on some soothing light music. It wasn't until the car pulled into the parking lot of the apartment building in the city center that Isabella seemed finally to break free from the nightmare. With Greer's help, she sank onto the sofa in his apartment. After sipping half a glass of lukewarm water, she began to recount, in halting words, what had happened over the past 3 days: the betrayal by Noah, Lucy's provocation, the despair of being locked in the bedroom, and the sinister plot to seize control of the Cavendish mining rights. He'd not only been secretly involved with Lucy for ages, Isabella said, her fists clenched so tightly that her nails dug deeply into her palms, her knuckles turning pale, her eyes blazing with fury, but he'd also secretly transferred the shares my father left behind, and even forged documents to try to transfer the mining rights into his own name. She clenched her fists even tighter, her nails digging deeper into her palms, her knuckles turning white as she continued, her voice trembling with anger. I'm determined to sue him, not just for divorce, but to make him and that woman pay for everything they've done. Gray looked into her eyes and saw a mix of stubbornness and vulnerability. His heart felt as though it were being squeezed by something painful. He turned around, walked into the bedroom, and brought out a brand-new smartphone along with its charger, handing them to her. The screen already had a new SIM card inserted for her. First, call your lawyer and tell him everything you know. If you need evidence gathered, surveillance arranged, or any other kind of help, just give me a call anytime. My phone's on 24 hours a day. He deliberately kept his emotions in check. Isabella had already endured far too much. He couldn't afford to add any more emotional weight to her burden. All he could do now was be her strongest support. Isabella took the phone, her fingertips brushing against its warm surface. Her eyes welled up with tears, and when she looked up at Gray, tears nearly spilled over again. She forced herself to offer a pale but genuine smile. Gray, thank you. In my darkest hour, I'm so glad you're here. You're the only person I can trust right now, she said, her head lowered as she busily set up fingerprint unlocking. She was so focused on entering the lawyer's phone number that she didn't notice Gray staring at her, his eyes brimming with a tenderness and concern that couldn't be hidden, soft as melting spring water, almost spilling over. Meanwhile, Gray stood rooted to the spot, watching her slender back, silently vowing to himself, this redemption has only just begun. When Isabella saw the photos of Noah's betrayal, her emotions spiraled out of control, and she abruptly swept everything off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. Instead of offering the empty reassurance of "don't get upset," Gray quietly crouched down to pick up the scattered pieces. As he picked up a photo of Lucy wearing a necklace, a flicker of murderous intent flashed briefly in his golden wolf-like eyes, but he quickly suppressed it, calmly flipping the photo face down onto the table, effectively shielding himself from the jarring image. He handed Isabella a cup of warm water, wiping away the condensation on the cup with a cloth until it was completely dry. Do you want me to pay a little visit to that woman's apartment? He asked softly. Or maybe you'd like her to have a little accident at some dinner party? No, Gray. Thanks for everything you've done for me, but I want to handle this myself. Isabella looked at Gray, her eyes brimming with hatred. Several weeks later, the evidence was being collected methodically. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window in her office, Isabella watched children wearing red Christmas hats chasing and playing joyfully in the street below. Sunlight streamed through the glass, warming her body and banishing the last remnants of gloom. That evening, Gray's Twilight Tavern had been transformed into a festive Christmas wonderland. A wreath of pine branches hung above the entrance, adorned with twinkling LED lights. The wall behind the bar was covered with golden star stickers, and most striking of all was the over-meter-tall Christmas tree standing proudly in the center of the bar. Its branches were festooned with tiny bells, reindeer figurines, and colorful lights, while the star atop the tree sparkled brilliantly under the warm yellow glow. As Isabella pushed open the familiar copper-bellied door, a crisp chime mingled with the gentle guitar melody of Jingle Bells washed over her. Gray, wearing a red knitted sweater, was bent over, tuning his guitar strings. Upon seeing her enter, his eyes lit up instantly. He set down his guitar and hurried toward her. "You're here. I specially saved you a seat by the window, and I even warmed up some mulled wine for you." His fingertips still carried the faint scent of rosin from when he'd been adjusting the strings, and his smile radiated a relaxed warmth. Isabella took her usual seat, and there, on the table, sat a steaming mug of mulled wine, its aroma of cinnamon and orange filling the air. Holding the warm cup in her hands, she watched as Gray picked up his guitar again, his fingers gently plucking at the strings. The familiar melody began to flow. This time, it wasn't Hotel California. Instead, it was Silent Night, the song her mother had loved most during her lifetime. Under the soft glow of the lights, Gray's profile appeared especially gentle. His silver-gray eyes, illuminated by the colorful lights, seemed to hold tiny flecks of starlight. As the song came to an end, Gray put down his guitar and walked over, holding a small velvet box in his hand. "It's a Christmas gift," he said, handing it over with a hint of shyness, his ears faintly flushed. "It's not anything fancy, but I hope you like it." Isabella opened the box, revealing a delicate gardenia-scented candle nestled inside. Delicate snowflake patterns were carved around the wick. She picked up the candle and brought it gently to her nose, inhaling deeply. The familiar fragrance of gardenias instantly filled her nostrils, exactly the same scent as the perfume her mother had left behind. Her eyes welled up with tears, and she looked up at Gray, her voice trembling slightly. "How did you know?" "Every time you come to the pub, you always carry that scent," Gray said, scratching his head with a sincere look in his eyes. "I asked a friend who's a perfumer, and he recreated this candle based on the memory of that exact aroma. I think it might make you feel like Mom is always right here by your side," Isabella said. She tightened her grip on the candle in her hand, feeling the warmth of the velvet box against her palm, a gentle touch to a soft spot deep within her heart. As she looked into Gray's eyes, where tenderness was laid bare without a hint of concealment, she suddenly burst into laughter, tears still lingering at the corners of her eyes, yet somehow resembling the first red plum blossom blooming in winter. "Gray, thank you. This is the best Christmas gift I've ever received." Isabella ran her fingers over the weathered wooden guitar resting on the bar counter and asked curiously, "Why do you keep playing those old songs? You could play so much wilder rock music if you wanted." Gray had been wiping a wine glass when he paused mid-motion. A bitter smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he replied, "Because some sounds are just too loud. They stir up the beast inside me. Only these soothing melodies let me remember that I'm still human." He stepped up to her, picked up the glass of whiskey she always used to drink, and held it out in front of her. "And by the way," he said, "I've added a bit of forest mint and rosemary to this glass. You used to say that after you drank it, your headache would ease up. Actually, it was because those dirt particles were finally staying far away from you." The firelight from the hearth flickered, and Gray stood in the shadows beside her, his silver-gray eyes glowing strikingly in the dimness. He watched Isabella's profile, bathed in golden light from the flames, and his Adam's apple bobbed slightly as he reached out, as if to brush away a wisp of candle smoke caught in her hair. His fingertips hovered just a centimeter above her strands, yet in the end, he merely made an airy gesture, gathering the air around her instead, before casually slipping his hands back into his pockets. The pub wasn't crowded. Some guests softly hummed Christmas carols along with the guitar, while others engaged in hushed conversations. The warm glow of the lights mingled with the aroma of mulled wine, creating an atmosphere that felt deeply comforting. Isabella held a mug of mulled wine, gazing out the window at the delicate snowflakes gently drifting down. Then she glanced over at Gray, who was quietly by her side, offering silent companionship. Suddenly, she realized that all those past betrayals and heartaches had somehow become badges of growth. This Christmas, there were no more false lies, no more desperate imprisonment, only warm companionship and hope rekindled. She knew the road ahead would still be long, but with Gray by her side, she'd never again be afraid to walk it alone.